You didn't just randomly end up with the life you have. You were born into a very specific time with very specific patterns already in motion. And whether you realize it or not, you've been living inside that pattern your entire life. The way you think, the way you react, the way your life has unfolded, that's all coming from your Uranus sign. Every generation is born into a different kind of disruption, instability, and awakening because Uranus doesn't just describe your personality, it reveals the generational pattern you were born into, how that pattern has shaped your identity, decisions, and life path. It also reveals the rebellion you're living out, whether you realize it or not, and what you're actually here to evolve beyond. Because this is generational, be sure to also listen for patterns across different timelines. So, your parents, family members, your children, or even your future children. So, grab your birth chart, find the zodiac sign Uranus sits in your chart, and let's dive in.
Uranus in Aries was from 1927 to 1935. This is known as the silent generation, the survival pioneers who were forced to be strong before they had the chance to be themselves. I want to mention that if you are someone who was born during this generation or are listening for someone born during this generation, please do let me know in the comments. I would be honored to hear how this resonates for you. You were born into a world that didn't ease you into life. It demanded something from you immediately. This was an era shaped by the aftermath of economic collapse, the Great Depression and its lingering impact, a global atmosphere of uncertainty, scarcity, and instability, and survival becoming a priority, not self-discovery. There was a strong cultural undercurrent of do what you need to do to survive. Figure it out and keep moving. Strength is necessary. There is no time to be fragile. You were raised in environments where resources were limited, stability wasn't guaranteed, and life required action, resilience, and quick adaptation. There wasn't much space for exploring identity, expressing individuality, or asking, who am I? Because the focus was, how do I make it through this? So you grew up in a reality where survival came before self expression. Strength was developed out of necessity, and independence was learned early, whether you were ready for it or not. For many of you, this showed up as having to mature quickly, learning to rely on yourself at a young age, or understanding that waiting or hesitating wasn't always an option. You were the generation that learned action isn't optional, it's required. And that shaped everything about how you move through life. Being born with Uranus in Aries created a nervous system that is wired for action, response, and self reliance. You became someone who moves quickly when something needs to be done, feels an internal push to handle things independently, has a natural instinct to take initiative, even in uncertain situations. Your nervous system adapted to a world where waiting could mean losing opportunity or safety, where hesitation wasn't always an option, and where strength and action were directly tied to survival. So instead of developing identity through exploration, you developed it through experience and necessity. So this can show up as a strong sense of independence, a tendency to act first and process later, feeling uncomfortable relying too heavily on others. You may have also learned that you have to take care of yourself, that strength is more reliable than vulnerability, and that you can't always wait for support. You have to move. So your identity became rooted in being capable, strong, being someone who handles what life puts in front of you. But internally, this also creates difficulty slowing down, resistance to vulnerability, and a feeling that you always need to be on or ready. Because you didn't just experience action, you experienced the pressure to act, even when you haven't had time to fully feel or process. Being born with Uranus in Aries means that your rebellion was against limitation of self, against anything that tells you who you're allowed to be, what you're capable of, when or how you should take action. You are the generation that embodies independence, challenges restrictions through action, moves forward even when the path isn't fully clear. So, this can look like taking initiative in ways others might hesitate, choosing action over overthinking, or creating your own path when one isn't clearly defined. But this rebellion wasn't always external, because a part of you might have still carried the pressure to always be strong, the instinct to handle everything alone, the belief that slowing down is not safe. So, this created an internal tension between wanting to rest or soften and feeling like you always need to keep going. The shadow side of this shows up as burnout from constant action, difficulty asking for or receiving support, reactivity instead of intentional response, and feeling like you have to prove your strength. So you may have found yourself asking, why do I feel like I always have to be strong? Why is it hard to slow down or ask for help? Why do I act first and process later? This is because your system learned if I don't move, something could be lost. But your evolution was never about constant action. It was about learning how to choose your actions rather than being driven by them. You are here to redefine what strength actually means, not as constant action and not as independence at all cost, but as something that includes awareness, intention, and self-trust. Your generation's role was to show that action can be powerful, but it doesn't have to come from pressure. It was to redefine strength as something that includes both movement and presence, and to demonstrate that independence doesn't mean isolation. But your evolution didn't come from stopping your drive. It came from learning how to direct it with awareness rather than letting it run automatically. Because everything you've developed around your courage, your ability to take action, and your instinct to move forward were all powerful strengths. But they were never meant to exhaust you. They were meant to help you initiate, lead, and create without losing connection to yourself. You were the generation that turns action into intention, strength into self awareness, and independence into empowered choice. Some ways to step into this energy is to pause before action so that your response becomes intentional. You don't have to react immediately to everything. Power comes from choosing when and how you move. Next is to allow yourself to receive support without seeing it as weakness. Strength expands when it includes connection, not just independence. Next is to notice where you're acting from pressure instead of purpose. Not all movement is aligned. So ask yourself, am I choosing this or reacting to something? And finally, redefine strength to include rest, reflection, and presence. You don't lose power by slowing down. You refine it. A great affirmation for your Uranus in Aries is, I trust my strength without needing to prove it. I move with intention, clarity, and self-awareness. Please do let me know how this resonated for you if you are from this generation or are listening for someone from this generation. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this gave you clarity, be sure to support this video with a like, share it with someone who's figuring this out too, hype this video, and subscribe to stay in the flow. All of my offerings, including one-on-one sessions, audio guidance, courses, and digital journals, are all linked in the description box below. So be sure to check them out. I appreciate you, and thanks so much for watching. Uranus in Aries was from 2011 to 2019. This is Generation Alpha, the bold initiators who were born to be themselves before the world knew how to handle it. These children were born in a world that moves fast, a world where technology is immediate and constant. Attention spans are shorter, but stimulation is higher. Individuality is encouraged, but often still judged. Expression is visible, but not always understood. They entered a reality where identity is something you're expected to define early, where independence is developed faster than previous generations, and where the world is constantly reacting, shifting, and responding. But here's what makes their experience different. They didn't ease into self-awareness. They came in already activated. This is a generation that speaks up earlier, asserts themselves more quickly, and has a natural instinct to act, move, and express without waiting. And for parents with this generation of children, this can feel like strong personalities at a young age, resistance to control or rigid structure, or even a need for autonomy that shows up early. But this isn't defiance for no reason. This is a generation that feels, I know who I am, or at least I know I need the space to figure it out. They weren't born to wait their turn. They were born to initiate something new. These children have a nervous system that is wired for action, independence, and immediacy. They are naturally quick to respond, quick to express, quick to move toward what they want. They don't process life slowly. They experience it in real time and react just as quickly. This can show up as strong reactions when something doesn't feel right, a desire to do things on their own, even before they're fully ready, or frustration when they feel restricted, controlled, or slowed down. Their system is learning through doing, not just being told, through experience, not just instruction. But without guidance, this can feel like impulsiveness, reactivity, and difficulty pausing before acting. For parents, this might look like, why are they so quick to react? Why do they want to do everything themselves? Why is it so hard to slow them down? This is because their system isn't designed to wait. It's designed to move. And for the older kids in this group, this might feel like, I don't like being told what to do. I want to figure things out my own way. I get frustrated when I can't act on what I feel. This isn't something to fix. It's something to direct. For Uranus and Aries, your particular style of rebellion is against being controlled before you understand yourself. It's against being told who to be before you've had the chance to explore it. This is the generation that pushes back against rigid authority, that challenges rules that don't make sense to them, and that wants autonomy earlier than expected. So, this can show up as questioning instructions instead of blindly following them, wanting to do things independently, even if it leads to mistakes, or resisting environments that feel overly restrictive. But this rebellion isn't negative, it's purposeful, because these children are here to break patterns of passive living. They're not here to sit quietly and wait, to follow directions without understanding why, or to become who they're told to be. But without guidance, this energy can turn into frustration, anger, and acting out instead of acting with intention. For parents, the challenge is not shutting this down, but helping them channel it. Because underneath the rebellion is a strong sense of self trying to form, a desire to act from authenticity, and a need to experience life directly. These children are here to redefine what it means to be an individual, not as something that develops slowly over time, but as something that is activated, explored, and embodied early. Their role is to break cycles of passive identity development, to show that self-awareness can begin young, and to lead with courage, initiative, and authenticity. But their evolution depends on guidance, because their power doesn't come from constant action. It comes from learning how to act with awareness. For parents with children from this generation, this means supporting their independence without removing structure. It means allowing them to explore while teaching them how to pause. And it means guiding their strength without suppressing it. Because everything that they already have, which is confidence, their instinct to act, and their desire to be themselves, are gifts, but they need to be shaped, not shut down. They are the generation that will turn impulse into intentional action, reactivity into self-awareness, independence into empowered leadership. Now, some ways to support this generation to step into their evolution is to give them controlled independence instead of total restriction. Let them make choices, but within a safe structure. This helps them to learn how to use their independence. Next is to teach them how to pause, not just what to do. Their growth comes from learning. I can act, but I can also choose how I act. Next is to validate their need for autonomy without letting it turn into chaos. They don't need control, they need guidance. There's a difference. And finally, model self-awareness in your own actions. They learn through what they see. The more intentional you are, the more they will become. This generation didn't come here to be shaped into who the world expects them to be. They came here to become who they already are faster than anyone before them. A great affirmation, if you have a child with this placement, or if this is your placement, is I trust who I am becoming. I am strong, capable, and I learn how to use my power with awareness. If this was helpful for you, be sure to let me know in the comments. And if this helped you to understand yourself or your child on a deeper level, be sure to like this video, pass it to someone who needs it, hype this video, and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. And if you're looking for even more guidance, be sure to check out all of my offerings, which are linked in the description box below. This includes one-on-one sessions, courses, digital journals, and audio guidance. So be sure to check them out. I appreciate you, and thanks so much for watching. Uranus in Taurus was from 1934 to 1942. This is the second half of the silent generation, the security builders who were born into scarcity and had to create stability from the ground up. I'd also like to preface for this particular sign, if you were born during this generation or you're listening for someone who was born during this generation, I would be honored for you to let me know in the comments how this resonates for you. You were born into a world where survival was directly tied to resources. This was the era shaped by the lingering effects of the Great Depression, financial instability that impacted entire families and communities, a deep cultural focus on saving, conserving, and making things last, as well as the understanding that resources could disappear and needed to be protected. There was also a strong emphasis on financial caution, building something stable and tangible, not wasting what you had, and creating security through consistency and effort. You were raised in environments where money wasn't always abundant. Stability had to be built carefully and slowly, and security wasn't assumed. It was earned and maintained. For many of you, this showed up as watching the adults around you navigate scarcity, learning early that nothing should be taken for granted, and understanding that comfort and security required effort. There wasn't much space for risk-taking, experimentation, or letting go of what felt stable, because the underlying message was hold on to what you have because you might not get it again. So you grew up in a reality where stability became a priority, security became a focus, and value became something deeply tied to what you could build, keep, or maintain. You were the generation that learned security is something you have to create and protect. Being born with Uranus in Taurus created a nervous system that is deeply attuned to stability, security, and preservation. You became someone who values consistency and reliability, feels safest when things are predictable and steady, and someone who understands the importance of building something that lasts. Your nervous system adapted to a world where resources could fluctuate or disappear, where stability required effort and maintenance, and where letting go could feel risky or unsafe. So instead of feeling naturally secure, you learned how to create and maintain security. So this can show up as being careful with decisions, especially around money or long-term stability. Holding on to what you've built, even when it may no longer fully align, or even feeling discomfort around sudden change or unpredictability. You may have also learned that security equals safety, that stability should be prioritized over risk, and that what you have is something to hold on to. So, this caused your identity to become rooted in being dependable, grounded, and being someone who creates stability in uncertain situations. But internally, this can also create fear of loss, resistance to change, and a tendency to stay in what's familiar, even if it's no longer fulfilling. Because you didn't just experience stability, you experienced the need to protect it at all cost. Being born with Uranus in Taurus means that your rebellion has always been against instability, but also against the fear of losing what you've built. You were the generation that learned how to create stability in a world that didn't guarantee it. The generation that challenged the idea that security only comes from holding on. And the generation that began to redefine value, not just as what you have, but how you experience life. So, this can look like building something sustainable, even in uncertain conditions, learning when to hold on and when to let go, and questioning whether security should come at the cost of growth. But your rebellion wasn't always obvious because a part of you always carried this instinct to preserve, the fear of losing what you've built, and the belief that stability must be maintained at all times. So, this created an internal tension between wanting to feel secure and needing to evolve beyond what feels safe. The shadow side of this can show up as holding on to situations, roles, or resources longer than necessary, avoiding change even when it's needed, defining your value based on what you have rather than who you are, or feeling stuck because letting go feels too risky. So you may have found yourself asking, what if I lose what I've worked for? How do I know when it's safe to change? Why is it so hard to let go, even when I know I need to? This is because your system learned if I let go, I might not get it back. But your evolution, was never about holding on forever. It's been about learning how to create stability from within, not just from what you keep. You are here to redefine what true security actually means, not as something you hold on to and not as something external, but as something that is created internally and carried with you, no matter what changes. Your generation's role has been to show that stability can exist, even in change. It's been to redefine value as something deeper than material or external security, and to demonstrate that true safety comes from within, not just from what you have. But your evolution doesn't come from abandoning stability. It comes from learning how to trust yourself to create it no matter what environment you're in. Because everything you've developed, your ability to build, your understanding of value, your commitment to creating something lasting, these are all powerful strengths, but they're not meant to keep you stuck. These strengths were meant to help you to feel secure without needing everything around you to stay the same. You are the generation that's meant to turn security into self-trust, stability into inner grounding, and value into something that comes from within. Some ways for you to step into this is to redefine security as something you carry, not something you hold on to. What you've built matters, but it's not the only source of stability. Next is practice letting go in small ways to build trust and change. You don't have to release everything at once. Start by loosening your grip just enough to see that you'll be okay. Next is to separate your value from what you own, earn, or maintain. Your worth isn't defined by what you have. It's defined by who you are. And finally, allow stability to evolve instead of trying to preserve it exactly as it is. True stability adapts. It doesn't stay fixed. A great affirmation for Uranus and Taurus is, I am secure within myself. I trust my ability to create stability, no matter what changes. Again, if you are someone from this generation, please be sure to let me know in the comments how this resonated for you, or if you've listened for someone who is from this generation, be sure to let me know. And if this brought you clarity that you didn't have before, be sure to hit like, share this video, hype this video, and subscribe to stay connected to this kind of energy. And if you felt seen, let's go deeper in a one-on-one session where we will shift your entire life concept. Plus, I offer over 10 different session styles to match exactly what you're moving through. All of my offerings are linked in the description box below, so be sure to check them out and book your session. Uranus in Taurus was from 2018 till current 2026. This is a mix of Generation Alpha and Generation Beta. They are the value shifters who were born into instability and will redefine what security actually means. If you are a parent to a child born during this generation, just know that these children were born into a world where stability is no longer guaranteed, and everyone knows it. This is the era of rapid economic shifts and uncertainty, changing job markets, career paths, and income structures, the rise of digital money, online business, and non traditional income. This is the era of a collective questioning of what security actually means. They entered a reality where the old model of work hard, get stable, stay secure is breaking down. A reality where adults themselves are still trying to figure out what stability looks like. They entered a reality where money, value, and success are being redefined in real time. For parents with these children, this looks like trying to guide them through a world that doesn't have clear answers yet. It looks like navigating financial or structural uncertainty while raising them. And it looks like realizing that what worked before may not work for them. So these children are growing up in an environment where stability feels flexible, not fixed. Value is constantly shifting. Security is something that has to be redefined, not inherited. And they can feel that. Even at a young age, they are absorbing conversations about money, stress, and uncertainty, the energy of change happening around them, and the reality that things don't stay the same way they used to. So internally, this generation begins forming the understanding that if nothing is guaranteed, I have to figure out what actually matters. These children have a nervous system that is highly attuned to stability, safety, and value. But in a world where those things are constantly shifting, they are naturally grounded but aware of change. They are sensitive to environments that feel unstable or inconsistent. And they are naturally drawn to what feels secure, even if they don't fully understand why. They process life through their senses, their physical environment, their feeling of safety in the moment. But because they're growing up in a world where stability isn't fixed, their system can oscillate between wanting consistency and having to adapt to change. This can show up as sensitivity to changes in routine or environment, a strong attachment to what feels familiar or safe, or emotional responses when things feel uncertain or unstable. For parents, this might look like, why do they get so attached to certain things? Why do changes affect them so deeply? And why do they need so much consistency? This is because their system is trying to anchor into stability in a world that's still redefining it. And for the older kids in this group, this may feel like, I want to feel safe and secure, but things keep changing. I don't like when things feel uncertain. Or I want to hold on to what feels good or stable. This isn't resistance. This is their system learning what is actually safe to build on. For Uranus and Taurus generation, their rebellion is against false stability. It's against systems that look secure but don't actually feel secure. They are the generation that will question traditional ideas for work, money, and success. They will resist building a life based on outdated definitions of stability. And they are the generation that will seek value that feels real, not just socially accepted. So this can show up as wanting to do things differently from what they're taught, not being motivated by traditional rewards or structures, or valuing freedom, fulfillment, and alignment over just security. But their rebellion isn't loud in the way Aries is. It's quieter but firm. And it sounds like, this doesn't feel right to me. I don't want to do this just because I'm supposed to. I want something that actually feels good and stable. Now, without guidance, this can turn into resistance to structure, avoidance of things that feel uncertain, or overattachment to comfort or familiarity. For parents, the challenge is not forcing them into outdated systems, but helping them build new ones that actually work for them. Because underneath their resistance is a deep desire for real security, a need to feel grounded in what they're building, and an instinct to not settle for what doesn't feel aligned. These children are here to redefine what stability actually means, not as something that's rigid or inherited, but as something that is aligned, adaptable, and internally grounded. This generation's role is to break outdated systems around money, work, and value, to create new ways of building security that are flexible and sustainable, and to show that true stability comes from alignment, not just structure. But their evolution depends on guidance, because their power doesn't come from holding on to everything that feels safe. It comes from learning how to create safety no matter what changes around them. So for parents, this means teaching them that stability can evolve, helping them build confidence in their ability to adapt, and showing them that value comes from within, not just from external systems. Because everything they already have, such as their awareness of what feels stable, their connection to value and worth, and their desire to build something real, are gifts. But they need to be supported and not forced into old definitions. They are the generation that will turn security into self-trust, value into self-worth, and stability into something that evolves with them. Some ways that you can support children of this generation to step into their evolution is to create consistency in the home, even if the outside world is changing. Their system needs something stable to anchor into. You don't have to control everything, just create a foundation that they can rely on. Next is to teach them that change doesn't mean instability. It means growth. Help them understand. Just because something changes doesn't mean you're not safe. Next is to encourage their sense of value beyond money or material things. Show them their worth isn't just what you have, it's who you are. And finally, model adaptability without fear. They are watching how you respond to change. The more grounded you are, the more secure they will feel. This generation didn't come here to inherit a version of stability that no longer works. They came here to create one that actually does. A great affirmation for any children with Uranus in Taurus is, I am safe, supported, and secure within myself. I trust my ability to create a life that feels stable and aligned. If this was helpful for you in understanding your child or family members better, be sure to let me know in the comments below. And if this gave you clarity, be sure to support this video with a like, share it with someone who needs this, hype this video, and subscribe so you never miss what's next. And all of my offerings, including one-on-one sessions with me, courses, digital journals, and audio guidance, are all linked in the description box below. So be sure to check them out. I appreciate you, and thanks so much for watching. Uranus in Gemini is from 1941 through 1949. This represents the first generation of baby boomers, the signal breakers who were raised on one version of the story and had to learn how to think for themselves. And again, if you are from this generation, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. I would be honored to hear how this resonates with your experience. And also, if you're listening for someone from this generation, please feel free to let me know how this resonates as well. With Uranus in Gemini, you were born into a world where information was powerful, but not always free. This was the era of World War II and its aftermath, government controlled messaging and propaganda, limited media channels where a small number of sources shaped public perception, and clear narratives being created to maintain order, unity, and direction. There is a strong cultural emphasis on trusting authority when it came to information, on accepting what was presented as truth, and on following narratives that were designed to create stability. But beneath that, information was being managed. What people knew was carefully selected. What people believed was often influenced. And what was shared publicly didn't always reflect the full picture privately. You were raised in a world where communication was structured, intentional, and filtered. There were clear, right ways to think, speak, and understand the world. A world where questioning what you were told wasn't always encouraged. And yet, something in you noticed. Even if you didn't have the language for it at the time, you could feel that certain things didn't fully add up, that there were gaps between what was said and what was real, that truth wasn't always as simple as it was presented. So while the world around you operated on, this is the story, this is what's true, your internal experience quietly began to say, there's more here than what I'm being shown. You were the generation that learned truth can be shaped by how it's communicated. Being born with Uranus in Gemini created a mind that is constantly observing, interpreting, and questioning what's being said. You became someone who picks up on tone, wording, and subtle shifts in communication. Someone who can sense when something is being presented in a specific way, and someone who naturally reads between the lines, even in everyday conversations. Your nervous system adapted to a world where information wasn't always complete. Communication had layers, both spoken and unspoken. A world where understanding required more than just listening. It required interpretation. So instead of simply receiving information, you learned how to analyze it. This can show up as thinking deeply about what people say and what they don't say, being mentally active, curious, and always processing, feeling a need to understand the why behind things. There's also a deeper imprint where you may have learned that what you hear isn't always the full truth, that you have to think for yourself, even when it's uncomfortable. And that understanding requires questioning, not just accepting. So your identity became rooted in being mentally aware, being observant, being someone who seeks to understand beyond the surface. But internally, this can also create overthinking, mental restlessness, and a tendency to question things without always feeling fully grounded in an answer. You don't just experience communication, you experience the layers beneath it. With Uranus and Gemini, your rebellion is against controlled narratives. It's against being told what to think instead of being trusted to think for yourself. You are the generation that began to question the information you were raised on, that seeked out alternative perspectives and deeper understanding, that recognized when communication felt incomplete or influenced. So, this can look like challenging ideas that were once considered questionable, looking beyond surface level explanations, wanting to understand the truth from multiple angles. But your rebellion wasn't always loud because part of you was still conditioned to respect authority in communication, to follow structured ways of thinking, and to trust the systems that delivered information. So, this creates an internal tension between accepting what you were taught and questioning what you've come to realize. The shadow side of this can show up as overanalyzing without feeling fully certain, questioning everything, but not always trusting your own conclusions, or feeling mentally active, but not always mentally settled. You may have found yourself asking, how do I know what's actually true? Why do I feel like there's always more to understand? Why can't I just take things at face value? This is because your soul isn't here to accept information as it's given. It's here to understand how truth is formed and how it can be reshaped. You are here to redefine how people think, communicate, and understand truth. Not through control, not through blind acceptance, but through awareness, curiosity, and conscious thought. Your generation's role was to break patterns of unquestioned belief systems, to encourage independent thinking, and to show that truth requires exploration, not just acceptance. But your evolution doesn't come from questioning everything endlessly. It comes from learning how to trust your own mind once you've done the work to understand. Because everything you've developed over your life, such as your awareness, your curiosity, and your ability to analyze and interpret, those are powerful strengths, but they were never meant to keep you in constant questioning. They were meant to help you arrive at clarity and then stand in it. You are the generation that turns information into understanding, questioning into clarity, communication into conscious truth. Some ways that you can achieve this is to allow yourself to trust your conclusions after you've explored them. You don't have to keep questioning once something feels clear. At some point, growth requires you to say, I understand this enough to move forward. Next is to notice where overthinking is replacing clarity. More analysis doesn't always lead to more truth. Sometimes it creates distance from it. Next is to speak your perspective, even if it challenges what's been accepted. Your voice is part of how truth evolves. You don't need to match the narrative. You're here to expand it. And finally, simplify how you process information. Not everything needs to be dissected. Clarity often comes from stepping back, not digging deeper. You didn't come here to believe everything you were told. You came here to understand what's true and think for yourself. A great affirmation for Uranus and Gemini is, I trust my mind to understand and discern truth. I allow clarity to guide me forward. If you're from this generation or you're listening to someone from this generation, please feel free to comment below and let me know how this resonated for you. And if this is your kind of space, show this video some love with a like, share it with your circle, hype this video, and subscribe so we stay locked in. And if you felt seen, let's go deeper in a one-on-one session where we will shift your entire life concept. Plus, I offer over 10 different session styles to match exactly what you're moving through. All of my offerings are linked in the description box below, so be sure to check them out and book your session. I appreciate you, and thanks so much for watching. Uranus in Cancer is from 1948 to 1956. This is the baby boomers, the emotional rebuilders who were born into instability and had to redefine what home really means. I am honored to be able to speak for this generation. So if this is reaching you, please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. You were born into a world that was trying to rebuild itself. This was the post-war era, a time where families were being restructured after deep collective trauma. Stability was being recreated, but often on fragile emotional foundations. There was a strong focus on creating safe homes, even if emotional needs weren't fully understood. This was also a time where security was prioritized, but emotional expression wasn't always a part of that equation. There was a cultural emphasis on family unity, traditional roles within the home, and creating stability through structure, routine, and predictability. But underneath that, there was unprocessed emotion, grief that wasn't fully expressed, fear that wasn't fully acknowledged, pain that was carried but not always talked about. So you grew up in environments where home may have looked stable on the outside, but didn't always feel emotionally secure, where care was provided, but emotional understanding wasn't always present. Environments where love may have existed, but wasn't always expressed in ways that felt safe or consistent. For many of you, this showed up as a deep awareness of emotional undercurrents in your home, a need to adapt to the emotional state of others, learning to prioritize stability, even if it meant suppressing your own feelings. You were the generation that learned safety is something you create, not something you're automatically given. And that realization shaped everything. Uranus in Cancer created a nervous system that is deeply attuned to emotional safety, but not always sure how to maintain it. You became someone who feels responsible for the emotional environment around you, someone who is highly sensitive to shifts in mood, tone, and energy, and who understands how to create stability but may struggle to feel it internally. Your nervous system adapted to a world where emotional security wasn't always consistent. Stability had to be maintained or protected, where safety was something that could be disrupted and needed to be preserved. So instead of simply feeling safe, you learned how to create safety for others. So this can show up as being the one who holds things together emotionally, prioritizing family, home, or stability over your own needs, feeling a deep attachment to creating security, even when it comes at a cost. There's also a deeper imprint here where you may have learned that your role is to take care of others emotionally, that stability requires sacrifice, and that your own emotional needs may need to be set aside to maintain peace. So your identity became rooted in being the caretaker, the stabilizer, the one who makes sure everything is okay. But internally, this can create emotional suppression, a sense of caring more than your share, a longing for a deeper, more consistent sense of safety. You don't just experience home, you experience the responsibility of maintaining it. Rebellion for Uranus in Cancer is against inherited definitions of home and family. It's against the idea that stability has to come at the cost of emotional truth. You are the generation that began to question traditional family roles, that redefines what home actually means, that recognized that emotional safety matters just as much as physical security. So, this can look like creating different family dynamics than what you were raised in, prioritizing emotional awareness in ways previous generations didn't, seeking deeper emotional connection, even if it disrupts old patterns. But your rebellion wasn't always obvious because a part of you has always held on to the need to maintain stability, the instinct to protect others emotionally, and the belief that it's your responsibility to keep everything together. So, this creates an internal tension between wanting to create something new and feeling responsible for preserving what already exists. The shadow side of this can show up as overgiving in relationships or family dynamics, struggling to express your own emotional needs, feeling responsible for other people's feelings or well being, or holding on to roles that no longer feel aligned. So you may have found yourself asking, why do I feel responsible for everyone? Why is it so hard to prioritize myself? Why does letting go of control feel unsafe? This is because your system learned if I don't hold it together, everything could fall apart. But your evolution isn't about holding everything together. It's about learning how to feel safe without carrying everything alone. You are here to redefine what emotional safety actually means, not as control, not as responsibility, but as something that is felt, shared, and internally anchored. Your generation's role is to break cycles of emotional suppression within families, to redefine home as a space of emotional truth, not just stability, and to show that care doesn't have to come at the cost of self abandonment. But your evolution doesn't come from withdrawing from connection. It comes from learning how to create safety within yourself. So you are no longer responsible for creating it for everyone else. because everything you've developed, your emotional awareness, your ability to care deeply, your instinct to protect and nurture, those are powerful gifts, but they were never meant to turn into emotional weight you carry alone. They were meant to help you create environments where safety is shared, not managed. You are the generation that turns responsibility into emotional awareness, stability into true safety, care into connection without self sacrifice. The first step to achieving this is to recognize that you are not responsible for everyone's emotional state. You can care deeply without carrying everything. Ask yourself, what is mine to hold and what isn't? Next is to start prioritizing your emotional needs without guilt. Your feelings are not secondary. They are just as valid and important as the ones you've been caring for. Next is to redefine safety as something internal, not something you have to control externally. True stability comes from within, not from managing everything around you. And finally, allow support and connection to be mutual, not one-sided. You don't have to be the strong one all the time. Let others show up for you too. You didn't come here to hold everything together for everyone else. You came here to redefine what safety actually feels like. A great affirmation for Uranus and Cancer is, I am safe to feel, safe to receive, and safe to be supported. I no longer carry what was never mine to hold alone. If you're from this generation and this reached you, or you're listening for someone from this generation, please do let me know how this resonated for you. I'm so curious. And if this brought you clarity you didn't have before, be sure to like this video, share it, hype it, and subscribe to stay connected to this kind of energy. And if you felt seen here, a one-on-one is where we take that surface recognition and turn it into real personalized guidance. One session can shift how you see your entire life. Plus, I have over 10 session types that you can customize to whatever you're working through. All of my offerings are linked in the description box below, so be sure to check them out. I appreciate you, and thanks so much for watching. Uranus in Leo was between 1955 and 1962. This represents the baby boomers, the identity liberators who were taught to perform and had to learn how to be seen for who they truly are. You were born into a world that valued image, roles, and external validation. This is an era where identity was often shaped by how you were perceived. Success was tied to recognition, status, and approval. There were clear expectations around how you should present yourself to the world. And where individual expression existed, but often within socially acceptable boundaries. There was a strong emphasis on looking the part, playing roles that aligned with societal expectations, being admired, respected, or recognized for who you appeared to be. And underneath that, there was pressure. A pressure to be impressive, be likable, be someone others could approve of or be proud of. You were raised in environments where attention could feel conditional. Being seen often meant being evaluated. Expression was encouraged, but only when it fit within certain limits. And for many of you, this created an early awareness of how you were being perceived, what version of yourself was acceptable, and what parts of you needed to be adjusted to receive approval. So while the world told you, be confident, express yourself, shine, there was an unspoken condition, which was, but only in a way that will be accepted. You were the generation that learned being seen and being accepted were not always the same thing. Being born with Uranus in Leo created a nervous system that is deeply aware of visibility and what comes with it. You became someone who feels the weight of being seen, noticed, or evaluated. Someone who understands how to present yourself in a way that gains approval. Someone who has a natural desire to express, but also a hesitation around doing it fully. Your nervous system adapted to a world where attention could feel both rewarding and exposing, where approval could feel validating, but also conditional, and where expression could bring connection, but also judgment. So instead of expressing freely, you learned how to perform strategically. This can show up as being highly aware of how others perceive you, holding back parts of yourself to maintain approval, or feeling a pull between wanting to be seen and wanting to stay protected. There's also a deeper internal imprint. So you may have learned that your value is tied to how you are received, that being liked is safer than being authentic, and that recognition matters, but it doesn't always feel fulfilling. So your identity can become split between the version of you that is visible and the version of you that remains private. So you may have had moments where you felt like you've been seen, but not fully known, where you've played roles, but haven't fully expressed who you are, where you received validation, but still felt unseen at your core. You don't just experience expression, you experience the risk of being fully seen for who you are. The rebellion of Uranus in Leo is against performative identity. It's against the idea that you have to be a certain version of yourself to be accepted. You are the generation that begins questioning roles, labels, and expectations placed on identity. The generation that challenges the idea that approval should define self-worth. The generation that feels the pull to express something deeper than what's been socially accepted. So, this can look like breaking away from identities that no longer feel authentic, letting go of roles that were built for approval, not truth, wanting to express yourself more freely, even if it feels unfamiliar or uncomfortable. But your rebellion isn't always loud because a part of you still holds on to the desire to be liked, the need to be accepted, the fear of what happens when you're fully seen. So this creates an internal push pull, wanting to express more, but holding back, wanting to be seen, but controlling how much is revealed, wanting authenticity, but fearing rejection. The shadow side of this can show up as performing different versions of yourself depending on the environment. seeking validation but feeling disconnected when you receive it, holding back your full expression to maintain approval, or feeling like you're always almost being yourself, but not fully. So you may find yourself asking, why doesn't being recognized feel as fulfilling as I thought it would? Why do I still feel unseen even when people are paying attention to me? Why is it so hard to just be myself without thinking about how it's received? This is because your soul isn't here to perform. It's here to express something real. You are here to redefine what it means to be seen, not as performance, not as approval, but as authentic expression without self-filtering. Your generation's role is to break the link between validation and self-worth, to show that visibility doesn't have to come at the cost of authenticity, and to redefine expression as something that comes from within, not something that's shaped for others. But your evolution doesn't come from avoiding visibility. It comes from learning how to be seen without changing who you are in the process. Because everything you've developed, your awareness of perception, your ability to express, and your desire to be seen, those are not weaknesses. They are tools, but they were never meant to be used to create a version of yourself for others. They are meant to help you share who you actually are without needing it to be approved first. You are the generation that turns performance into authenticity, validation into self-recognition, visibility into real expression. The first step to achieving this is to notice where you're performing instead of expressing. So ask yourself, if I didn't need approval, how would I show up differently? Next is to allow yourself to be seen in ways that feel real, not perfected. You don't need to refine yourself before you express yourself. Your authenticity is what creates connection, not your performance. Next is to separate your self-worth from how others respond to you. Being liked is not the same as being aligned. Your value doesn't fluctuate based on reception. And finally, practice expressing without overthinking how it will be received. Your power grows every time you show up as yourself, without adjusting for approval. You didn't come here to perform a version of yourself the world would accept. You came here to be seen for who you actually are. A great affirmation for Uranus and Leo is, I allow myself to be fully seen without changing who I am. My expression is valid, worthy, and enough as it is. Where did your perspective shift while listening to this? Let's chat about it in the comments. And if you're on this journey with me, be sure to like this video, send it to people who need this, hype this video, and subscribe so we stay tapped in together. And if you're watching videos like this but still feel like something isn't fully clicking, this is where it actually comes together. My As Above, So Within prompt journal walks you through your chart in a way that turns awareness into real understanding. Be sure to tap the link in the description box to check it out and get started. I appreciate you, and thanks so much for watching. Uranus in Virgo was between 1961 and 1969. This represents Generation X, the system disruptors who were taught to perfect everything but are here to learn how to let go. You were born into a world that valued precision, productivity, and performance above almost everything else. This was an era that emphasized work ethic as identity, being useful, efficient, and reliable as measures of worth, following systems, routines, and structures without questioning them, and the belief that if everything was done correctly, life would stay under control. There was a strong cultural focus on discipline over emotion, responsibility over rest, fixing problems instead of feeling them. And beneath that, there was a quiet pressure, a pressure to get things right, not make mistakes, be dependable, capable, and in control. You were raised in environments where being good often meant being compliant. Being valued meant being helpful or productive, where there wasn't always space for imperfection, messiness, or emotional expression. And for many of you, this wasn't just external, it became internalized early. So you may have felt like you had to earn your worth through what you did, like there was always something that needed improvement about your life, your work, or yourself. Like relaxing or letting go felt uncomfortable or even unsafe. You were the generation that learned if everything is in order, nothing can go wrong. But of course, life doesn't actually work that way. And over time, that belief began to crack. Uranus in Virgo created a nervous system that is constantly scanning for what needs to be fixed. You became someone who notices details others miss, feels responsible for improving, organizing, or correcting what's around you. Someone who has a strong internal standard for how things should be. Your nervous system adapted to a world where control felt like safety, productivity felt like stability, and precision felt like protection. So instead of relaxing into life, you learned how to manage it. So this can show up as overthinking decisions because you want to get them right, feeling uneasy when things are unstructured or uncertain, or holding yourself to standards that are difficult to maintain long term. There's also a deeper layer to this. So you may have learned that rest equals laziness, mistakes equal failure, or that your value is tied to what you contribute. So this causes your identity to become rooted in being the reliable one, the one who handles things, the one who keeps everything functioning. But internally, this can create self criticism, burnout, and a constant feeling that something still isn't enough. So you don't just experience life, you experience the pressure to improve it at all times. With Uranus in Virgo, your rebellion is against perfectionism, It's against systems that expect you to function without questioning whether they're actually working. You are the generation that begins to question traditional work structures, challenges the idea that productivity equals worth, and that recognizing that constant improvement can become self punishment. So, this can look like pulling away from rigid systems that feel draining or unsustainable, questioning career paths that prioritize output over well being, or seeking more balanced ways of living, even if you're not fully sure what that looks like yet. But your rebellion isn't always obvious because part of you still holds on to the belief that you need to stay on top of everything. You need to keep improving. You need to maintain control to feel safe. So the rebellion can feel internal, like wanting to let go, but not knowing how, craving ease, but defaulting to pressure, desiring freedom, but recreating structure. The shadow side of this can show up as being overly critical of yourself or others, feeling responsible for things that aren't fully yours to carry, or struggling to slow down without feeling guilty. So you may find yourself asking, why can't I relax? Why do I always feel like I need to do more? Why does it feel like I'm never fully finished? This is because your system was trained to believe there's always something to fix. But your evolution isn't about fixing everything. It's about learning how to exist without needing to improve every moment of it. You are here to redefine what it means to live a functional, meaningful life. Not through perfection, not through constant productivity, but through balance, presence, and intentional effort. Your generation's role is to break the belief that worth is tied to output, to humanize systems that have become too rigid or demanding, and to show that structure can support life, but it shouldn't control it. Now, your evolution doesn't come from abandoning structure completely. It comes from learning how to use structure as a tool, not as a measure of your value. Because everything you've developed, your awareness, your attention to detail, your ability to improve and refine, those are gifts, but they were never meant to turn inward as pressure. They're meant to help you create a life that feels supportive, sustainable, and aligned with your well being. You are the generation that turns perfection into presence, productivity into purpose, control into conscious choice. The first step to achieving this is to redefine what enough looks like for you. Not everything needs to be optimized or improved. Ask yourself, what would feel complete, not perfect? Next is to practice allowing things to be unfinished without judgment. Your growth isn't measured in how much you fix. It's measured by how much you can allow. Next is to notice where your standards are creating pressure instead of support. High standards can be empowering, but only when they don't disconnect you from yourself. And finally, Create systems that serve your life, not control it. Structure should create ease, not tension. If it's draining you, it's not aligned. You didn't come here to fix everything. You came here to learn how to live without turning your life into a constant project. A great affirmation for Uranus in Virgo is, I release the need to perfect everything. I allow myself to exist, grow, and be enough as I am. Where are you still choosing the version of you that keeps you stuck? Be sure to let me know in the comments. And if this helped you to understand yourself on a deeper level, be sure to like this video, pass it to someone who needs it, hype this video, and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. And if you felt seen, let's go deeper in a one-on-one session where we will shift your entire life concept. Plus, I offer over 10 different session styles to match exactly what you're moving through. All of my offerings are linked in the description box below, so be sure to check them out and book your session. I appreciate you, and thanks so much for watching. Uranus in Libra was between 1968 and 1975. It represents Generation X, which are the cycle breakers who refused to lose themselves in love. You were born into a world where relationships were roles before they were connections. This was an era that emphasized marriage as a milestone, not necessarily a conscious choice. Staying together for stability, reputation, or family image. Gender roles that defined who you were supposed to be in a partnership. And the idea that love required compromise, even at the cost of yourself. There is a strong cultural narrative around keeping the peace, no matter what it cost emotionally. Prioritizing harmony over honesty. Maintaining relationships, even when they were no longer aligned. And underneath that, something was quietly unraveling. You were raised during a time where divorce rates were rising. Relationship dissatisfaction was becoming more visible, and the idea of forever was starting to crack, but hadn't been redefined just yet. So you grew up witnessing contradictions such as relationships that looked stable on the outside but felt disconnected underneath. People staying together out of obligation, not alignment. And love being associated with sacrifice, silence, or self-abandonment. And for many of you, this wasn't just something you observed. It was something you felt. You learned early on that being loved could mean losing parts of yourself. That keeping the peace could require suppressing your truth. And that relationships weren't always safe spaces for authenticity. So while the world told you this is what love looks like, your experience quietly whispered, this doesn't feel right. Being born with Uranus in Libra created a nervous system that is highly attuned to others, but often disconnected from itself. You became someone who can read people, emotions, and dynamics quickly, who is aware of how your presence impacts others, and someone who understands what's needed to maintain connection or harmony. But that awareness often came from adaptation, not freedom. Your nervous system learned to scan for tension, imbalance, or disconnection in relationships, to adjust, soften, or accommodate to maintain peace, to prioritize the emotional state of others as a way to feel safe. So instead of developing identity in isolation, you developed identity in response to others. So this can show up as struggling to fully know what you want without considering someone else, feeling pulled between maintaining connection and honoring yourself, or a pattern of compromising too much or swinging to the opposite extreme and avoiding connection altogether. There's also a deeper internal imprint with this placement. You may have learned that being chosen means being agreeable, that conflict threatens connection, and that love requires adjustment. So now your identity can feel like it lives in a constant question. Where do I end and where do they begin? You don't just experience relationships, you experience the energetic balance within them. The rebellion of Uranus in Libra is against losing yourself in connection. It's against relationships that require you to shrink, silence, or reshape who you are. You are the generation that questions traditional relationship roles, walks away from connections that look good but feel misaligned. The generation that begins redefining what partnership actually means. So, this shows up as choosing independence over staying in unfulfilling relationships, refusing to tolerate imbalance, even if it creates conflict, rewriting what commitment looks like on your own terms, and seeking relationships that feel equal, not performative. But your rebellion isn't just external, it's internal. Because part of your evolution is learning how to stay connected to yourself while being connected to someone else, how to express your truth without fearing the loss of love, and how to allow relationships to be honest, not just harmonious. So, the shadow side of this rebellion can look like avoiding relationships altogether to maintain independence, swinging between overgiving and pulling away completely, struggling to find balance between self and partnership, or feeling like you have to choose between love and authenticity. So you may find yourself asking, why do relationships feel so complicated? Why do I either lose myself or push people away? Why is balance so hard to maintain? This is because your soul is learning something most people never fully master, which is how to be fully yourself and fully connected at the same time. You are here to redefine what partnership actually means, not as sacrifice, not as performance, but as a space where two people can exist fully without losing themselves. Your generation's role is to break cycles of codependency and self abandonment in relationships, to redefine love as something that includes truth, not just harmony, to create models of partnership that are balanced, conscious and aligned. But your evolution doesn't come from avoiding relationships. It comes from learning how to stay rooted in yourself while still allowing connection to exist. Because the real shift happens when you realize you don't have to choose between being loved and being yourself. You are the generation that turns connection into conscious partnership, harmony into honest expression, love into something that doesn't require self loss. The first step to achieving this is to start defining yourself outside of who you are in relationships. Take time to ask, who am I when I'm not adjusting to someone else? Your identity needs space to exist independently before it can thrive in connection. Next is to practice telling the truth, even when it disrupts harmony. Peace that requires silence isn't real peace. Your power grows every time you choose honesty over temporary comfort. Next is to notice where you're overcompensating to maintain balance. If you are always the one adjusting, softening, or holding things together, that's not balance. That's self-abandonment in disguise. And finally, let relationships reflect you, not define you. The right connection won't require you to become someone else. It will reveal more of who you already are. You didn't come here to keep the peace at the cost of yourself. You came here to redefine love without disappearing inside it. A great affirmation for Uranus in Libra is, I am allowed to be fully myself and fully loved at the same time. I choose connection that honors my truth. If I just exposed a pattern you've been in, say it out loud in the comments and let me know. And if this gave you clarity, be sure to support this video with a like, share it with someone who's figuring this out too, hype this video, and subscribe to stay in the flow. And if you know you're meant for more but can't quite access it yet, a one-on-one with me will help you step into that version of yourself with clarity and direction. Plus, I offer over 10 different session styles to match what you actually need. All of my offerings are linked in the description box below, so be sure to check them out. I appreciate you, and thanks so much for watching. Uranus in Scorpio is between 1974 and 1981. So this represents Generation X, which are the truth exposers who were forced to see what others avoided. You were born into a world that didn't talk about what was actually happening beneath the surface. This was an era where power, control, and manipulation existed, but weren't openly acknowledged. Emotional pain was often suppressed, hidden, or dismissed. Topics like trauma, sexuality, mental health, and abuse were kept behind closed doors. And an era where families, institutions, and systems maintained appearances, regardless of what was actually happening underneath. There was a strong emphasis on privacy over vulnerability, control over emotional expression, keeping things together even when things were falling apart. You were raised in environments where you could feel something was off, but no one was naming it. There were unspoken dynamics, tensions, or secrets that shaped everything, where you learned early on that not everything could be trusted at face value. And for most of you, this wasn't just external, it was personal. This generation came into contact with emotional intensity at a young age, power dynamics that felt confusing or overwhelming, situations where you had to become aware of things you weren't fully equipped to process yet. So while the world around you tried to maintain control, you were developing X ray vision. You learned to read between the lines, to sense what wasn't being said, to understand that truth doesn't always live on the surface. You were the generation that realized what's hidden often holds more power than what's visible. Being born with Uranus in Scorpio created a nervous system that is deeply attuned to intensity, power, and emotional undercurrents. You became someone who can feel what others are trying to hide, picks up on energy shifts, tension, and unspoken dynamics instantly, and someone who has a natural instinct to go deeper, beyond surface level conversations and experiences. But this level of awareness came at a cost. Your nervous system adapted to environments where emotional safety wasn't always guaranteed, where control and unpredictability existed at the same time, and where you had to stay alert to what might happen next. So instead of feeling relaxed in surface level environments, you may feel more at home in intensity. So this can show up as being drawn to deep, all or nothing experiences, struggling to trust what looks too easy or too simple, or feeling like you always need to understand what's really going on beneath the surface. Now, there's also a deeper internal imprint. So, you may have learned that vulnerability can be risky, that trust has to be earned or even controlled, or that power dynamics are always at play in some type of way. So, you developed an identity that is emotionally perceptive, protective of your inner world, and constantly aware of the balance between power and surrender. So you don't just experience life, you experience the layers underneath it. The rebellion for Uranus in Scorpio is against suppression, against silence, against pretending things aren't happening when they clearly are. You are the generation that brings hidden truths to the surface, that questions power structures that rely on control or secrecy, the generation that refuses to ignore emotional or psychological depth. So, this can look like speaking on topics others are uncomfortable addressing, breaking cycles of silence within families or communities, confronting dynamics that have been avoided for generations, and speaking truth even when it's uncomfortable or disruptive. But your rebellion isn't just external, it's deeply internal. Because part of your journey is learning how to stop controlling your own emotions, how to stop suppressing your own vulnerability, and how to stop trying to maintain power at the cost of connection. The shadow side of this rebellion can show up as power struggles in relationships, emotional walls that keep people at a distance, feeling like you always have to be in control to stay safe, or being drawn into intense cycles that are hard to let go of. So you may find yourself asking, why do my experiences always feel so intense? Why can't things just be simple? Why do I keep attracting situations that force me to go deeper? This is because your soul doesn't do surface, but your evolution isn't about staying in intensity forever. It's about learning how to move through it without losing yourself in it. With Uranus in Scorpio, you are here to transform the way we understand power, vulnerability, and truth. Your generation's role is to expose what has been hidden so it can be healed, to break cycles of silence around trauma, control, and emotional suppression, and to redefine power, not as control, but as self awareness and emotional depth. But your evolution doesn't come from staying guarded. It comes from realizing that true power is not in control. It's in your capacity to be fully present with what's real. Because everything you've experienced, the intensity, the depth, the awareness, it wasn't meant to harden you. It was meant to give you the ability to see clearly, feel deeply, and transform what others are still avoiding. You are the generation that turns shadow into awareness, awareness into healing, healing into transformation. The first way for you to achieve this is to release the need to control what you feel. You don't have to manage, suppress, or contain every emotion. Your power expands when you allow yourself to experience without trying to dominate the outcome. Next is to let vulnerability become a strength, not a risk. You were taught that opening up could be dangerous, but your next level comes from choosing safe spaces where you can be seen without losing your power. Next is to notice where you're recreating intensity instead of resolving it. Not every experience needs to be extreme to be meaningful. Ask yourself, am I choosing this because it's aligned or because it feels familiar? And finally, use your depth to transform, not just uncover. Seeing the truth is your gift, but your purpose is to go one step further, which is to heal, shift, and evolve what you uncover. You didn't come here to avoid the darkness. You came here to see through it and change what others were too afraid to face. A great affirmation for Uranus and Scorpio generation is, I trust my depth without fearing it. I release control and allow transformation to move through me. What part of this felt a little too accurate for comfort? Be sure to drop it in the comments. And this isn't just content, it's activation. So be sure to like this video, share it, hype it, and subscribe so you keep building on this momentum. And if you feel like you've outgrown where you are, but don't know what comes next, a one on one with me will help you understand exactly what's shifting and why. Plus, I have over 10 different session types so you can customize to whatever you're working through. All of my offerings are linked in the description box below, so be sure to check them out. I appreciate you, and thanks so much for watching. Uranus in Sagittarius is between 1981 and 1988. So this represents the millennials who are the truth seekers who outgrew everything they were taught. So you were born into a world that promised certainty, a world that said, if you follow the steps, your life will work out. If you do everything right, you'll be secure. If you believe what we believe, you'll be okay. There is a strong emphasis on education as the gateway to success, institutions as authorities on truth, as well as religion, culture, and societal norms being passed down without question. But underneath that structure, something was already shifting. You were raised during a time where the world was becoming more globally connected. Different cultures, perspectives, and belief systems were becoming more visible, and information was expanding, but wisdom wasn't keeping up. So while you were being taught that there was one right way to live, you were simultaneously being exposed to evidence that there were many. And no one explained that contradiction. So you grew up in a reality that felt like you were supposed to follow a path that didn't fully resonate. You were expected to believe things you hadn't personally experienced as truth. And you were given answers, but not taught how to question them. For many born with Uranus in Sagittarius, there was a breaking point that came later. It was when you did everything right, but you still felt disconnected. When you reached milestones you were told would fulfill you, and they didn't. And when you started realizing the life you were prepared for wasn't the life you actually wanted. That's the moment your Uranus energy activates. Uranus in Sagittarius created a mind and a nervous system that cannot stay inside something that feels untrue. You became someone who feels an internal reaction when something doesn't align, someone who can sense when a path looks right but isn't right for you, and someone who needs meaning, not just structure, to feel grounded. Your nervous system learned early on that stability doesn't always equal truth, that authority doesn't always equal accuracy, and that safety doesn't always equal alignment. So instead of becoming someone who settles, you became someone who searches constantly. So, this shows up as a deep restlessness when life starts to feel too repetitive or limiting, an urge to change directions once something stops feeling meaningful, as well as a pattern of outgrowing identities, relationships, and environments faster than expected. And over time, this can create an identity that feels like, I don't know exactly where I'm going, but I know when something isn't it. So you may have moments where you question yourself. Why can't I just stick with something? Why does everything eventually stop feeling right? Why does my path look so different from everyone else's? But this isn't inconsistency. This is discernment developing in real time. You weren't designed to follow a fixed path. You were designed to refine your truth through experience. The rebellion of Uranus and Sagittarius is not surface level, it's philosophical, existential, deep. You are the generation that refuses to accept because that's just how it is, because that's what everyone does, because that's what you're supposed to believe. Even if you tried to conform, something in you wouldn't let you stay there. So your rebellion shows up in ways like walking away from careers that looked successful but felt empty, questioning or leaving belief systems you were raised in, choosing a path that feels aligned, even if it confuses or disappoints others, or constantly seeking experiences that expand your understanding of life. But the deeper layer is that your rebellion isn't just about rejecting what's outside of you, it's also about confronting what's inside of you. Because many of you were conditioned to look outside of yourself for answers, to trust systems more than your own intuition, and to believe that someone else holds the correct perspective. So now your life becomes a constant tension between seeking truth externally and slowly learning to trust it internally. And when that balance hasn't landed yet, it can feel like you're always searching for the next answer, that you're never fully satisfied with where you are, or that you're chasing clarity, but it keeps moving. That's the shadow loop. Because the moment you realize you're not here to find the truth, you're here to become it, everything shifts. You are here to redefine what truth actually means, not as something that's fixed, not as something that's inherited, but as something lived, tested, experienced, and embodied. Your generation is meant to break belief systems that limit growth, expand the definition of purpose beyond traditional paths, and to show that truth is not one size fits all. It's personal, evolving, and alive. But your evolution doesn't come from continuing to search. It comes from choosing to trust what your life has already shown you. Because every time you outgrew something, changed direction, or walked away from what didn't feel right, you weren't being lost. You were being led. Now your role is to take everything you've lived and turn it into something that helps others find their way. You are the generation that transforms experience into truth, truth into wisdom, wisdom into guidance. The first way for you to achieve this is to decide that your lived experience is enough to guide you. You don't need more proof, validation, or perspectives. At some point, growth requires you to say, I trust what I've learned through living. Next is to let yourself fully land in a chapter, even if it's not permanent. You don't need the full map. You just need to be present enough to extract truth from where you are. Constant movement keeps you searching. Presence gives you answers. Next is to notice where you're chasing expansion instead of embodying it. Traveling, learning, and growth, all of that is powerful. But your next level comes from asking, what have I already learned that I'm not fully living yet? And finally, share your perspective, even before it feels fully formed. You are not meant to have all the answers. You are meant to expand the conversation. Your voice becomes powerful the moment you stop waiting to be fully certain. You didn't come here to follow the truth you were given. You came here to live a life that proves there's more. A great affirmation for Uranus and Sagittarius generation is, I trust the truth that my life has revealed to me. I don't need to search for meaning. I create it through how I live. Be sure to tell me which part of this are you still avoiding in your real life. Let's talk about it in the comments below. And if this actually moves something in you, don't just sit on it. Be sure to hit like, hype this video, share it with someone who needs this, and subscribe for what's next. And if you felt seen here, a one-on-one is where we take that surface recognition and turn it into real personalized guidance. One session can shift how you see your entire life. Plus, I have over 10 session types that you can customize to whatever you're working through. All of my offerings are linked in the description box below, so be sure to check them out. I appreciate you, and thanks so much for watching. Uranus in Capricorn is from 1988 to 1996. This is the second generation of millennials, the system rebuilders who followed the rules and then watched them break. You were born into a world that believed in structure, success, and long-term stability. This was an era that emphasized climbing the ladder, building a career that would support your entire life, trusting institutions, corporations, governments, financial systems. The idea that hard work would always lead to security. There was a very clear narrative. Go to school, get a degree, get a stable job, and you'll be set. If you stay committed and disciplined, you'll be rewarded. That success is built over time, and once you have it, it lasts. You were raised to believe in long-term planning, delayed gratification, systems that were meant to support your future. But as you grew up, those systems began to shift. And for many of you, they didn't just shift, they collapsed. You witnessed economic instability, job markets changing or becoming unreliable, career paths that no longer guarantee security, and institutions losing trust, credibility, or consistency. So the very foundation you were taught to build your life on started to feel unstable. You may have followed the rules, got the degree, pursued the career, tried to build something stable, only to realize that stability wasn't as guaranteed as you were promised. You were the generation that learned Just because a system exists doesn't mean it will hold. Being born with Uranus in Capricorn created a nervous system that is constantly trying to find stability in a world that doesn't always provide it. You became someone who thinks long term but questions whether the plan will actually work. Someone who values structure but feels uncertain about where to place it. Someone who wants security but doesn't fully trust the systems that were supposed to provide it. Your nervous system adapted to a reality where stability could shift unexpectedly. Hard work didn't always equal guaranteed results, and where authority figures and institutions weren't always reliable. So instead of feeling grounded in structure, you learned how to navigate instability within it. This can show up as feeling pressure to figure it out while also questioning the path. Wanting to build something solid, but not fully trusting what's available. Or carrying responsibility at a young age, especially around career, money, or long term decisions. There's also a deeper imprint where you may have learned that you have to create your own stability, that you can't fully rely on external systems, and that security requires both effort and adaptability. So your identity has become rooted in being responsible, being strategic, being someone who is trying to build something that actually lasts. But internally, this can create pressure, fear of making the wrong long term decision, and a constant awareness of what could go wrong. This is because you don't just experience ambition, you experience the weight of trying to build something stable in an unstable world. Having Uranus in Capricorn means your rebellion is against outdated systems of success. It's against the idea that there is only one path to stability and that you have to follow it. You are the generation that questions traditional career structures, that challenges the idea of lifelong jobs or linear success, that begins redefining what stability actually looks like. So, this could show up as leaving careers that feel secure but unaligned, creating alternative paths to income, success, or purpose, building something outside of traditional systems, and wanting more flexibility, even if it comes with uncertainty. But your rebellion isn't always clean or clear because part of you still holds on to the desire for stability, the belief in structure, and the need to feel secure in your future. So, this creates an internal tension between wanting to break free from the system and still wanting the safety it was supposed to provide. The shadow side of this can show up as overworking to create a sense of control, feeling stuck between paths, unsure which one is truly secure, hesitating to fully commit because you don't trust the outcome, or trying to build something perfect before taking action. So you may find yourself asking, what if I choose the wrong path? How do I create stability when nothing feels guaranteed? Why does success feel so uncertain, even when I'm doing everything right? This is because your soul is here to do something different, not just follow systems, but rebuild them in a way that actually works. You are here to redefine what stability and success actually mean. not as something fixed and not as something guaranteed, but as something intentional, adaptable, and aligned with your reality. Your generation's role is to break outdated systems that no longer support real life needs, to create new structures that are flexible, sustainable, and aligned, and to show that success is not one path. It's something you build based on truth. But your evolution is not going to come from rejecting structure completely. It comes from learning how to build your own system, one that actually supports you. Because everything you've developed over your life, your awareness of instability, your desire for long-term success, your ability to adapt while still building, those are strengths. But they were never meant to trap you in pressure. They're meant to help you create something real, something that works, not just something that looks right. You are the generation that turns structure into strategy, pressure into purpose, success into something that actually feels stable. You can begin to achieve this by redefining what stability actually means to you. It doesn't have to look like what you were taught. So ask yourself, what would feel stable for me, not just what looks good? Next is to stop waiting for certainty before you build. The system you're meant to create doesn't come with guarantees. It comes from taking aligned action, even in uncertainty. Next is to release the pressure to get it perfect the first time. You are not here to follow a fixed path. You're here to build one through experience. And finally, trust your ability to adapt as much as your ability to plan. Your strength isn't just in structure, it's in your ability to adjust and still keep going. You didn't come here to follow a system that was already breaking. You came here to build one that actually works. A great affirmation for Uranus and Capricorn is, I trust myself to build a life that supports me. I create stability through alignment, not pressure. If I just exposed a pattern you've been in, say it out loud in the comments and let me know. And this isn't just content, it's activation. So be sure to like this video, share it, hype it, and subscribe so you keep building on this momentum. And if you felt seen here, a one-on-one is where we take that surface recognition and turn it into real personalized guidance. One session with me can shift how you see your entire life. Plus, I have over 10 session types that you can customize to whatever you're working through. All of my offerings are linked in the description box below, so be sure to check them out and book your session. I appreciate you, and thanks so much for watching. Uranus in Aquarius is from 1996 until 2003. This is Generation Z, the identity revolutionaries who were born to stand out in a world that made everyone visible. You were born into a world where individuality was encouraged, but visibility was constant. This was the era where the internet became a central part of daily life. Social media began shaping identity, connection, and self-perception, where people were no longer just living their lives, they were sharing them. Where visibility shifted from something occasional to something continuous. There is a strong cultural message of be yourself, stand out, be unique. But at the same time, there was an unspoken reality. Everyone was being seen. Everyone was being compared. Everyone was being evaluated constantly. You grew up in a world where identity wasn't just personal, it was public. Self-expression wasn't just internal, it was displayed. Where belonging wasn't just felt, it was measured through visibility, engagement, and validation. And this created a very specific tension. You were told to be different in a world where everyone was trying to do the same thing. So early on, you may have felt a desire to express who you truly are, but also an awareness of how that expression would be received. You felt a pull toward individuality mixed with the pressure to belong. You were the generation that learned being seen doesn't automatically mean being understood. Being born with Uranus in Aquarius created a nervous system that is highly attuned to identity, visibility, and belonging. You became someone who is constantly aware of how you're perceived. Someone who thinks about identity not just internally, but externally. And someone who understands how to express yourself in a way that connects with others. But this awareness developed in an environment where identity was fluid and constantly evolving, where social feedback was immediate and visible, and where belonging could feel conditional or temporary. So instead of forming identity in isolation, you formed it in real time in front of others. So this can show up as questioning who you are as you grow and evolve, trying different versions of yourself to see what fits, or feeling like your identity is always shifting or being refined. This placement also comes with a deeper imprint, where you may have learned that being different can bring attention, but not always acceptance. That belonging requires alignment, but not conformity. That your identity is something you have to actively define and not passively inherit. So, your nervous system can hold a desire to stand out, a fear of being misunderstood, and a need to belong without losing yourself, which can feel like, where do I actually fit if I'm not meant to be like everyone else? Because you don't just experience identity, you experience the process of constantly defining it. Being born with Uranus in Aquarius means your rebellion is against forced conformity. It's against the idea that you have to fit into predefined roles, identities, or systems in order to belong. You are the generation that challenges labels, categories, and limitations placed on identity. The generation that questions traditional definitions of success, purpose, and community. The generation that seeks authenticity, even when it means standing alone. This shows up as expressing yourself in ways that feel true, even if they're unconventional. Rejecting paths that don't align with your identity, and creating new forms of community that feel more inclusive and aligned. But your rebellion isn't just external. It's internal, because part of your journey is learning how to define yourself without relying on external validation. It's about learning how to stay grounded in your identity even when it's evolving. It's about learning how to feel a sense of belonging that isn't dependent on approval. The shadow side of this can show up as feeling disconnected or like you don't fully belong anywhere. Constantly shifting identity without feeling rooted. Seeking validation through visibility, but not feeling fulfilled by it. Or comparing yourself to others while trying to be different. You may find yourself asking, why do I feel like I don't fully fit anywhere? Why does being seen not always feel like being understood? Why is it so hard to just be myself without overthinking it? This is because your soul is here to do something most people don't fully step into. To create identity from within, not from what's reflected back to you. You are here to redefine what it means to belong, not through fitting in, not through external validation, but through authentic alignment with who you truly are. Your generation's role is to break rigid definitions of identity, to create spaces where individuality is actually supported, not just encouraged, and to show that belonging doesn't require losing yourself. But your evolution doesn't come from constantly redefining yourself. It comes from learning how to anchor into who you are, even as you grow. Because everything you've developed, such as your awareness of identity, your ability to express, and your desire to be both unique and connected, those are powerful strengths, but they were never meant to leave you feeling disconnected. They were meant to help you build a sense of belonging that starts within you and extends outward. You are the generation that turns identity into self-definition, visibility into authentic expression, belonging into something you create, not something you chase. Some of the best ways for you to achieve this is to define yourself based on what feels true, not what gets the most response. Your identity isn't something to be curated for others. It's something to be discovered and lived. Next is to allow your identity to evolve without losing your core. Growth doesn't mean you're inconsistent. It means you're becoming more aligned. Next is to separate visibility from validation. Being seen doesn't determine your worth. What matters is whether you feel aligned with what you're expressing. And finally, create connection from authenticity, not performance. The right people don't connect with a version of you. They connect with you. You didn't come here to fit into a world that was already defined. You came here to become someone who redefines what belonging actually means. A great affirmation for Uranus and Aquarius is, I belong to myself first. My identity is mine to define, express, and evolve. If I just exposed a pattern you've been in, say it out loud in the comments and let me know. And if this actually moves something in you, don't just sit on it. Be sure to hit like, hype this video, share it with someone who needs this shift, and subscribe for what's next. And there's only so much I can say here. So, a one on one with me is where we make it specific to you. Plus, I offer over 10 session styles to match exactly what you need. All of my offerings are linked in the description box below. So, be sure to check them out and book your session. I appreciate you, and thanks so much for watching. Uranus in Pisces was from 2003 until 2011. This is the next half of Generation Z, the sensitives who absorbed everything and had to learn what's actually theirs. You were born into a world that was emotionally overwhelming, but didn't always have the tools to process that overwhelm. This was an era where mental health awareness was increasing, but still not fully understood. Emotional expression was becoming more accepted, but not always supported. Social media was rising and exposing you to constant emotional input from others, and an era where the line between reality and perception was becoming more blurred. You entered a world where you could feel what was happening globally, not just personally. You were exposed to more emotion, more information, and more energy than previous generations at a young age. You entered a world where sensitivity wasn't always guided, it was often left uncontained. There was a strong undercurrent of anxiety, uncertainty, and emotional overwhelm. Escapism through media, fantasy, or digital spaces. A search for meaning, but without clear direction. So you grew up in environments where you were feeling more than you could explain. You were absorbing energy that wasn't always yours. You were navigating emotions that didn't always have language or structure. For many of you, this showed up as feeling deeply affected by your environment, picking up on emotions from others, sometimes without realizing it, and wanting to retreat, disconnect, or escape when things felt too intense. You are the generation that learned just because you feel something doesn't mean it belongs to you. But no one fully taught you how to separate that. Being born with Uranus in Pisces created a nervous system that is highly sensitive, intuitive, and emotionally open. You became someone who feels deeply, sometimes beyond what you can logically explain. Someone who picks up on subtle emotional and energetic shifts. Someone who has a natural connection to imagination, creativity, or spirituality. But this sensitivity developed in an environment where boundaries weren't always clearly modeled, where emotional processing tools weren't always available, and where overwhelm was common, but not always addressed. So instead of learning how to hold your sensitivity, you may have learned how to cope with it. This can show up as feeling emotionally flooded or drained, needing space, isolation, or escape to reset, or struggling to differentiate between your emotions and others' emotions. There's also a deeper imprint here where you may have learned that feeling everything can be exhausting, that it's easier to disconnect than to process, and that your inner world is safer than the external one. So your identity can become rooted in being sensitive, being intuitive, and being someone who feels deeply but doesn't always feel grounded. This can create a rich inner world, but difficulty staying present in reality. deep empathy, but emotional burnout, and strong intuition, but confusion when boundaries aren't clear. Because you don't just experience emotions, you experience the weight of everything you feel, whether it's yours or not. Being born with Uranus in Pisces means your rebellion is against emotional disconnection. It's against a world that feels overwhelming, but doesn't always provide grounding. You are the generation that begins to prioritize mental and emotional health, that seeks deeper meaning beyond surface level living, and that feels drawn to spirituality, healing, or inner work. So, this can look like questioning what's real versus what's perceived, exploring different ways of understanding emotions and energy, and wanting to live a life that feels meaningful, not just functional. But your rebellion isn't always direct, because part of you may still escape instead of process, disconnect instead of ground, avoid instead of fully feel. So, this creates an internal tension between wanting to understand your emotions and feeling overwhelmed by them. The shadow side of this can show up as escapism through media, distraction, or avoidance, emotional confusion or lack of clarity, and feeling lost, disconnected, or unsure of what's real. You may find yourself asking, why do I feel so much all the time? Why is it so hard to stay grounded? Why do I feel drained even when nothing is happening? This is because your soul is here to do something most people don't fully step into, to bring awareness to the emotional and energetic layers of reality and learn how to navigate them consciously. You are here to redefine what it means to feel, not as something overwhelming, not as something to escape, but as something that can be understood, processed, and integrated. Your generation's role is to break cycles of emotional avoidance and suppression, to bring awareness to mental and emotional health, and to show that sensitivity is not weakness, it's awareness. But your evolution isn't going to come from disconnecting from your emotions. It comes from learning how to stay present with them without losing yourself in them. Because everything that you've been developing, such as your empathy, your intuition, your emotional depth, those are powerful gifts, but they were never meant to overwhelm you. They're meant to help you connect more deeply to yourself, to others, and to life itself. You are the generation that turns emotion into awareness, sensitivity into strength, intuition into grounded understanding. The first way that you can achieve this is to learn to differentiate between what you feel and what you absorb. Not every emotion you experience is yours to carry. Ask yourself, is this mine, or am I picking this up from something outside of me? Next is to create grounding practices that bring you back into your body. Your sensitivity needs structure to feel safe. Grounding allows your intuition to function clearly. Next is to replace escapism with intentional rest and processing. There's a difference between avoiding and restoring. Choose what actually supports you, not what numbs you. And finally, trust your intuition, but support it with clarity and boundaries. Your inner knowing is powerful, but it becomes stronger when it's grounded in awareness. You didn't come here to escape what you feel. You came here to understand it and turn it into something powerful. A great affirmation for Uranus in Pisces is, I honor my sensitivity without losing myself in it. I am grounded, aware, and connected to what is truly mine. What part of this felt a little too accurate for comfort? Be sure to drop it in the comments and let me know. And if this actually moves something in you, don't just sit on it. Be sure to hit like, hype this video, share it with someone who needs this shift, and subscribe for what's next. And if you know you're meant for more but can't quite access it yet, a one-on-one with me will help you step into that version of yourself with clarity and direction. Plus, I offer over 10 different session styles to match what you actually need. All of my offerings are linked in the description box below, so be sure to check them out. I appreciate you, and thanks so much for watching.